everyone, and welcome to our session today on Microsoft Flow, What's New. Joining us today is Jeff Pergolski from Innovia Consulting. And before I pass it over to Jeff, I would like to remind you that this session is being recorded and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library later this week for you to review and share with anyone. And we ask that if you do have any questions, please go ahead and type those into the questions box, and we will get those called out at our Q&A time at the end of the presentation. So now I'll pass it over to Jeff to start our presentation.
All right. Thank you, Angie, and thanks for everyone who is attending today. So we are talking about Microsoft Flow and specifically what's new in Microsoft Flow. Let me, there is my contact information. I will pop that up again at the end. I'm a member of our customer engagement team and a pre-sales engineer. So we will jump right into it. I'm going to, in terms of just the overall presentation, I'm going to review some basics on Microsoft Flow, sort of just where it fits in the landscape of similar products, and then as well as how it fits into Microsoft's stack of solutions. And then from there, we are going to get into the nuts and bolts of what actually is new as of the last couple months related to Flow. Microsoft Flow has been around now for, gosh, 3 years. It's starting to, I still think of it as this new cool technology, but in reality, it's been around for a while. I think I presented on this topic at the user group summit back in 2016. So it has been around for a while. It is, as the slide shows, it's really a basic building block of maybe automation, but essentially it's a building block of programming in a if this then that sort of scenario. So really basic, but still a very powerful tool. So the IFTTT and Zapier are two products that existed before Microsoft Flow did, and have still a huge presence in the market. Microsoft is chewing away at that market share, but in a world of tools for developers or end users. I guess maybe competition is the wrong way to look at it. Another option for tools, I guess, is maybe a better way to look at it. So looking at sort of a way to level set this and to get people an idea of what does Flow do or what's possible with Flow. My wife is involved as a teacher in this Lego Mindstorm program about teaching 5th and 6th graders how to program robots. And of course, you're going to try to decide what programming language, et cetera, to use. And in the case of Lego, they've really broken it down into creating these blocks of programming it with an action and a flow block that an action block does something and a flow then moves the control of the program along. And that's basically what Microsoft Flow is designed to do. If something happens, if you receive an email, then do something with that. Either add it to an Excel spreadsheet, a SharePoint list. So it's at the very basics. It is just an if this then that programming tool. So we all want to program. What would Chuck do when it comes to programs? Chuck Norris doesn't need tools like Flow. He just looks at the screen and gets the program he wants. Unfortunately, we're not Chuck Norris. So there is Microsoft Flow. And sort of, I guess, where this fits in, this slide from Microsoft here about business automation challenges are met with a single solution. And in a lot of the organizations that we support, that solution is you. It's IT. It's one person, and there, you're expected to accomplish a whole bunch for your organization. So in that light, Microsoft has developed Flow as part of their Power Apps offering. And Power Apps, Microsoft refers to as their business application platform. So it's made up of Power BI, of Power Apps, and then Microsoft Flow. And just to kind of let you know where it fits in. Again, if you can sort of equate that Lego Mindstorm slide with this is there's two basic parts. There is a trigger and an action. So in this case, the sample here is when a file is created in Dropbox for a particular folder, then send an email and then add appropriate information so that the person that's receiving this email can determine what needs to be done, if anything. So So typical Flow use cases, it is really good to, in terms of getting notifications, synchronizing files, collecting data, and automating approval. It can do so much more than that, but in general terms, what you're doing with Flow is going to fall into one of these four buckets. And as Flow has advanced over the last 3 years, now it has gotten to the point where there's some branch possibilities in the code, multiple steps that you couldn't do before. So it's making it an even more powerful tool. I mean, you can get some pretty complicated, in-depth flows going if you want. Certainly don't need to, but it has grown to the point where Microsoft is added functionality to it so that you can do actual programming with it. And in terms of where it fits in their business application platform, essentially they've got three silos. Things you need to accomplish in your business: measure, act, and automate, and they've got a tool for each of those. And these tools, as the second line of the slide, empowers users. So you don't need to hire someone that's a formal developer to accomplish things that you want to in Microsoft Flow. You've got these applications that are pretty straightforward and easy to use. So it's making your development process more efficient. And most importantly, you can connect data across apps. That's really the as we start to look at Flow, certain things that you would do with Flow, like automate a notification from Twitter or from Instagram or SharePoint. A lot of those applications have their own functionality to do that. So Instagram or Twitter will pop a notification for you if you've turned that on. That's not really the interesting part or the powerful part of Flow. The powerful part of Flow is that it connects all of these different applications. So Microsoft, non-Microsoft, it does it through connectors and gateways, and then it also performs best in a common data model. So Flow will allow you to create this database in the common data model, or it'll interact with a common data model like Nav or Business Central, and allow you to create data inside that database, notify of changes of that database, and so it's a really powerful application in that way. And it's also really easy to get started using it. There's hundreds of, if not thousands by now, of pre-built templates that already have a lot of scenarios that other users have created, and they make that easy for you to get started without any sort of in-depth knowledge on programming. It starts with connectors to these different applications, and I'm just going to scroll through screen after screen after screen just to give you an idea of the number of connectors that exist. There are, if you'll notice, as these are flying by, some of them have a little green rectangle underneath with the word premium in there. As you can guess, that means you're going to have to pay something extra or have a better type of flow account. To get those, we'll talk about that here in a second. But there's all kinds of connectors, and when I initially started presenting on Flow, Flow was a preview only. Now that it is fully released, there are different ways for you to purchase Flow or to use it for free, and that's actually one of the biggest questions I get on Flow is how much is it going to cost me and my organization? And really, Flow can be used in so many different ways that it all depends. But there's a free version of Flow that's included when you create an Office 365 account. That doesn't need to have an Office 365 subscription associated with it. You can just create a free account that's associated with a business email, and that gives you the rights to run 2,000 flows per month. You can create as many as you want. It's got a 5-minute check, and you can connect to the basic Office 365 or Dynamics services. Then there are some additional Flow Plan 1 and Flow Plan 2 for heavy flow users. You see this is pretty inexpensive, $5 or $15 per month. And again, it's counting the runs per month. So 15,000 runs per month on Flow Plan 2, and then you start to get the check time down. This is checking every 3 minutes instead of every 5, and Flow Plan 2 runs every minute. Both of these paid for ones include the premium connectors that we saw on the previous screen, and then Flow Plan 2 actually allows you to run some control over your flow environment through organizational policy settings. So that is so that's where it starts. Now there's the packaging for Power Apps, and there's a lot of information on this slide. And for anyone who wants this after the fact, we're happy to share the slide deck with you. But basically the Office 365 applications include Microsoft Flow, or I should say Office 365 subscriptions. All of them include a component of Microsoft Flow. And then as you get into the Dynamics 365 applications, you get a little bit more. These, the plans, the Business Edition, Enterprise plans 1 and 2 on the Dynamics 365 portal include these. And then you can also just get standalone subscriptions, as you saw on the previous screen, for Microsoft Flow or for Power Apps, if you want to get beyond what Microsoft Flow can do. So the premium connectors, this is interesting that one of the new ones is Word Online. If you see near the top, we'll talk about that. That's brand new as of 2019, the ability to create Microsoft Word documents using Microsoft Flow. And let's see, here is the balance of the premium connectors. These are accurate as of yesterday. And some of the things that you are connecting to, you see like the Common Data Service. That is a premium connector, which seems to be a little bit counterintuitive if you're using Microsoft stuff to create a common data model. But that's the thing about the common data model. You don't need to be using Microsoft. You can pull a database out of essentially any ERP system and map that data into a common data model. And so maybe that's the reason that Microsoft includes it as a premium connector, or they just want to get a couple bucks more for all of the investment that they've made in Microsoft Flow for their end users. Again, here's a different chart that sort of just compares and highlights the differences between the free version up to Flow Plan 2. The ability to access on-premise gateways, you see, isn't supported in the free version, but a lot of people have information for you can include information and security around the data that is being shared with your Microsoft Flow users. So for some people, that is an important that's an important distinction. So you need to be on one of the paid for versions to get that. And let me see here. And basically the management side is where you really get into buying the paid for subscription where it really makes sense. And even if you're a super heavy Microsoft Flow user and you're doing stuff like measuring social media metrics or something along the lines of Twitter, where you're going to have it run thousands and thousands of times, you can see that you can get an additional 50,000 runs of your Microsoft Flow for $40. I don't really know if outside of maybe some marketing scenarios why you would ever have a flow that runs that much, but if if you do, Microsoft obviously sees some users in that spot, so they offer that as well. When you get to you create some flows, and those flows look like this. You can turn them on and off. You can edit them. You can throw them away. You can check in on them and determine when they were last run. And we'll dive in at the end to look at some of those flows. So where are flows available? This is somewhat new in terms of some of the areas. In 2018, the Microsoft added added flow as in context of SharePoint. So when you go to SharePoint, if you want to interact with that SharePoint site in some way, there's an add flow button right in the SharePoint browser. So that is new as of the end of 2018. NAV 2018 was the first version of, maybe we should be referring to it as Dynamics 365 Business Central on-premise, but regardless of what it's called, the 2018 version did include in the native application manage flows. So creating the ability to interact with automating processes or notifying users based on data changes, creation, deletion, etc. The approval process. And interestingly enough, for anyone who's been using NAV for a long time, you know that NAV has its own workflows that have been in the product for about the last 3 versions, and a little bit technical, sometimes a little tricky to get going. And Microsoft has inserted this into the product, and of course it's built into the Microsoft hosted version of Business Central to interact with data there. So sort of you can see Microsoft kind of nudging people, or at least giving them the option of using this product to handle automation within their ERP solution, rather than or in addition to being able to use the built-in stuff that they've had in the product for the last 3 years. So something that is brand new is now it is included in Excel. You need to go in and turn it on if you're using an Office 365 version of Excel. You've got the latest and greatest, and you can turn that on. Once you turn it on in advanced options, you start to get this pane on the right side of Excel here to create whatever you need from Flow. So these are some of the suggested templates that pop up when you put it on, or when you enable it in Microsoft Excel. But you can post messages to teams. If you're going to use Excel as a tool to organize, you can have notifications based on rows that are created. In a sense, you could have a flow created that created data in Excel from a SharePoint list, and then that triggered another flow within Excel to appropriate people. But it's you can start to see as it exists in their ERP solution, in Microsoft SharePoint solution, now in Excel. It's everywhere, and so it's probably good to be to start to become comfortable with it, or at the very least understand what's possible using it. The nav connector, this is just, we're not going to get into anything in creating any flows, but essentially you can create a connection to your nav environment, and then from there you can have actions on creating items, deleting. These are all item related ones. There are also approval ones, and essentially all you need in creating this connection is the OData URL feed and a username and password and company, so that it creates the items or notifies based on changes in the right company file within your nav if you are an organization that has multiple companies running in nav. So it's really easy to get that connection started, and once you have it started, then the fun begins. So something that another question that I've answered a lot in the past is, Microsoft Flow compared to Nav Workflow. How does what are the benefits of each of these, and why would Microsoft embed Microsoft Flow into their ERP product if they've already have a workflow solution in there? So just hitting the high points here. Microsoft Flow allows you to connect to stuff outside of Nav, and you only need the basic credentials for service or data object. You don't need to do all the setup that you do for the Nav workflow. So Nav workflow, you need admin rights to set it up, and it's run by the job queue. But in general, if you've worked in Nav configuring the workflow for approvals or anything for that matter, it is a lot more technical to do, and generally requires a lot more rights to do within Nav, where Microsoft Flow, it's going to rely on your Nav user account, so it still has the same security principles applied to it, but it's a lot easier to configure. And if you need to reach outside of Nav to interact with another solution, another application, another data set, you're going to want to use Microsoft Flow because Nav won't help you there. One of the scenarios that I think is cool is the Amazon Dash button. So for those of you who aren't aware, Amazon makes these buttons that they essentially give you. They charge you $5 and then give you a $5 credit on your first order, but it's a completely configured solution. So an example here, you stick the Tide Dash button on your washing machine, and anytime you're getting low on Tide, you press that button, and you've already authorized everything within Amazon so that you get your Amazon knows this is the kind of Tide you want, this is the size, this is your account information, this is the credit card that you've whitelisted for approval on this, and you push that button, and magically, if you're a Prime member, 2 days later, your Tide shows up. This is sort of a gratuitous slide here, but the fact that they make these dash buttons for people who eat Doritos and shoot Nerf guns enough to require an automated solution to reorder is just pretty cool, and that's a goal of mine to get to that point. Where it is interesting, I guess, is I did a scenario where I created essentially used a piece of physical hardware, a Flic button, and Microsoft Flow to create that same environment in Nav. So how cool would it be to make it that easy for your customers to reorder from you? You start to when you talk about that, Amazon doing it, one of the biggest retailers on the planet, like, okay, yeah, they've got infrastructure to support this Internet of Things, this IoT initiative that gives a little dash button the ability to to place an order. But I mean, the fact is, with Microsoft Flow, you can do that with anyone. So I created this scenario on a shop floor. We'd create a button that would when you could provision at one of your customers, say, hey, here's this button. Whenever you need more sheet metal from me, press it, and that will create an order. I did that scenario and I presented it at a couple of the user group conferences, and I could see the eyes twitching from the administrators and the security people around NAV and IT in general about, like, hey, what's to stop someone from pushing that button, like, hey, what does this button do? And pushing it and then pushing it and then pushing it and 15 more times, and you got a bunch of orders in your system. So we walked back that scenario to the fact that maybe a button push would only create an automated email that would reference a blanket order and then would allow someone on your team. So that's what I had adjusted my flow to do. But again, the same principle, like someone pressing a button in their warehouse where they need to buy stuff from you, putting it at the point. They don't have to walk back to a computer, but to be able to do that is pretty powerful. And to think about, well, that sounds pretty complicated, but essentially it's one of these little Flic buttons that they sell for like $35, and you can usually find them on sale a little bit cheaper than that. They've offered a glow-in-the-dark option. I had to put that on there. I don't have a glow-in-the-dark one yet, but I want one. And then essentially you configure these. They come in different colors. In this example here, I've got a black and a yellow one, and I can interact with it in a number of different ways. But it's essentially that easy with Flow. This is the Flow configuration screen. Having that sort of functionality is pretty cool. And to be able, to spend $5 a month to get the Flow Plan 1. You spend $35 on one of these buttons, and depending on what sort of business it is and what you're selling, that would probably be, if we could, increase if we could increase orders, make it easier for our customers to buy from us. That sort of investment, I'm guessing, would pay for itself in a bunch of different ways. These Flic buttons can be used, like I could use a Flic button. I've stuck one next to my doorbell, so when people push it, it sends me an email that says someone's at your door. Just dorky IT things that I would use, but they can be used for anything. You could use a Flic essentially as a remote light switch. If you've got some smart light stuff and you don't have Alexa or Google or Cortana to say turn off the lights, you can stick one of these Flic buttons and configure Microsoft Flow to automate that process. You can do a lot with them. So a fun little example. And let's see here. So getting down to what is important. New and improved. What is new and improved with Microsoft Flow as of the 2019 update? Let me get back to. So one of the important things is this new, more advanced condition builder. So remember, we talked about the very basics: if this, then that. Now with this advanced condition builder, it's even easier to write conditional logic in Microsoft Flow. And it used to be that you'd do this through these expressions that were sort of starting to look like complex, maybe chemistry or certainly some really high-level math. Now, with this release, Microsoft has gone to a sort of this GUI interface where each individual condition, you can add rows and groups, and then and there's really, there's no limits. You can make these as complicated as you want and as embedded as you want, but it really makes it a lot easier for anyone who has spent any time developing flows for their organization, not having to use the old way, and being able to use this advanced condition builders is really something that a lot of people have been looking forward to. Another thing that is cool as more and more people leverage SharePoint for its personal productivity and teamwork gains, embedding a SharePoint reminder into the SharePoint site through Flow is something that's sort of cool. So people have assignments per document, like, okay, we want a final copy of this document by such and such a day. These SharePoint reminders allow you to receive a personal email alert. You can configure it however many days in advance. Maybe you're responsible for a group of people that is working on a document that's important for your organization, so you want to receive an email to check status on that, and then that'll allow you to properly manage the members of your team who maybe aren't done with their portion yet. You can control how many days out these reminders are sent. Essentially, you're here setting a reminder for review, determining the number of days, and then once you do that, you get a SharePoint reminder via email that and for those organizations using SharePoint, this sort of thing is, linked directly to the SharePoint file, so you're not getting an email saying, it includes the link to the specific items that you are required to interact with in some way, which is pretty helpful. Some of the other advances in Microsoft Flow in their recent release have to do with sort of as that advanced condition builder. It makes it flow easier to administer. So this is something that this peak code that, if you've got a complicated flow with a number of steps, it can sometimes be difficult to understand exactly what will be sent to the connector from Flow. So Microsoft adding this peak code option in here with the little eye icon just allows you to peek behind the scenes. So when you select this option, you see the full representation of what that action is doing. It includes all the inputs of the action, so text and expressions and the logic, and it gives you a way to verify exactly what you're seeing. So this is I don't want to freak any non-developers like myself out. When I saw this, I thought, oh my God, that's what's going on behind the scenes. But yes, so being able to peek code that just shows you, and for developers that are helping support your organization, having this view is something that that you didn't have before. So Microsoft making this available to us is just further evidence that they really do want end users to sort of own this application and be able to leverage it within their organizations without having to rely on partners, or even requiring internal staff that has deep technical knowledge and development. Another area that has advanced the use of Flow within an organization is the ability to send Flow as a copy. So you've always had, since the inception of Flow, you've always had the ability to share flows within your organization. Now you've got a way to send it outside the organization. So to send a copy, obviously you want to make sure that it doesn't contain any personal information, but you can send flows that you've created that, and I think the example I show here is something that is a weather indication. So what are the weathers? What is the weather where you're at? And checking the forecast, and maybe that sends configure that to send it to you at a certain time each day, so you plan your next day appropriate. That is a so being able to do that, copy that, and send it to someone else is, of course, going to make it easier to do, and you can do that in a number of different ways, even within the flow here. Pulling down on the More button gives you the ability to send a copy. It's still in preview mode as of right now, so that screen cap is showing preview, but then you can also send it to, when you send a copy, it gives it to the appropriate people outside your organization, and this is the the email that they get, and just says that the sender that shared a flow with you, and if you want to create it for yourself, clicking that button gets you to into your flow environment. Once you authenticate, you see all the pre-configured connectors, etc., that you can change so that it works for you. Another interesting point is creating Word documents in Flow. So it again has to be Word documents that are supported by these Word files, I guess, have to exist in an area that is supported. So supported by Microsoft Graph, I should finish, which those locations are things like OneDrive for Business, SharePoint, and Office 365 groups. And so right now, the two things you can do with this new connector, once you enable it in your in Microsoft Word, you can create document templates. You have to turn that on through developer options, so that shows up on your ribbon. But once you do that, you have the ability to either automatically convert Word documents to PDF. So like, let's say you're going to send a Word document from SharePoint, and you're going to send it to someone, you don't want them to edit it. You could create a flow that when I send this, convert it to a PDF. That means that saves you the trouble of saving as a PDF and then sharing that document. You can just do it on the fly. That's pretty cool. And then also, and even potentially more powerful, this populating a template. So you could create a document template, and then from any other application, maybe it's an online survey that you've had people, it's a support request, something, it will take that data from the source document and fill it into the appropriate areas on a Word template, and you'll end up with a Word document coming out of there. So again, it's flow is everywhere, and I think that's pretty cool. Another area, I guess, is that they continually add connectors, and this was buried in the 4,000 connectors that I showed earlier in the presentation. But text sync is something that that's a pretty cool premium connector, but it essentially allows you to send and receive text messages while using Microsoft Flow. So maybe you're interacting with someone who, like, you're going to send them email, but maybe they stop checking their email at 5 p.m. at night, and you need to get a hold of them, and so you want to, or you stop monitoring your own email at 5 o'clock, and there's something that's even more important, whether it's server notifications or something that you want to use text message for. You can configure outbound or inbound SMS notifications using this connector. So if you receive a text, it can relay that and create it. Like I have I have for years had my text messages flow into my Outlook, so that I make sure that I don't miss text messages. Occasionally that leads to some flooding of my inbox, but now I don't have to rely on Exchange or Office 365 to do that, and I can get those notifications going both ways using Microsoft Flow. So that's pretty cool. The Flow virtual button that you can create, essentially a Flow button, not to be confused with those physical buttons I showed you earlier, but just creating a button on your phone using the Microsoft Flow mobile app. You can now do a number of different things generating text, a yes, no. I created a flow that just sent my my location to me, and just as a really silly example, but it gives you the now the improved button input. You can do any of these things. You can send an email, you can create a number, a date, text, and you know, this is a manually triggered flow. So when I push this virtual button on my phone, it wants to do something, but you can put some parameters in there. So like you can add multi-steps into the trigger so that you can define if fields are optional or not, or if there are it's a drop-down list, or if it's free flow input like characters, etc. So you know, having they're continually making the basic building blocks more and more powerful. And then along the lines of improving the overall interface, they've got a better integrated help and support experience in the Flow Designer. So it used to be when you'd hit the when you'd hit support from Microsoft Flow, you'd just be redirected to kind of a generic support experience at Microsoft.com to get support for it. Now it's actually a Flow specific portal, and they will start to ask you some questions about, you know, what kind of problem are you having? These questions and problem types and categories are specific to Flow. So that's something that that's pretty cool. And along with that new improved flow documentation. So you go to, you know, you have questions. We had some people that registered for the webinar that said, I don't know where to start with this. Well, you know, here you can, you know, they've segmented their documentation in a way so that, you know, if you're a beginner, you're not going to get overwhelmed with some stuff. You want to go to intermediate and expert, or you're a flow admin. They've got all their support stuff segmented that way. And one of the most important, I guess the most exciting for me, features of Flow that they've been talking about now for almost a year, based on a user suggestion through their portal, is the location of the Flow connector, or your location services, I should say, on your mobile device as a Flow connector, which is something referred to as geofencing, that you define a geographical area, and once that is defined, you can get notifications. You can do something when either you enter that area or leave that area. I used to love being a diehard Windows Phone user. One of the greatest things I thought about Windows Phone was the Cortana intelligent reminders. So you could configure a reminder for yourself, and it was based on a geographic location. So I would, instead of making a shopping list and keeping it on OneNote or something, or emailing it or texting it to myself, I would create an email list, or not an email list, I would create a Cortana reminder that said, hey, when you get by the grocery store, which in my case was Walmart, when you get near Walmart, these are the items that you need. And I didn't have to say when. All I needed to do was drive into the Walmart parking lot, and this list popped up and said, hey, you asked for a reminder. So Flow is it has released as of February 3rd, I guess. There was a release. I couldn't find it in my preview connectors, but it's been released in preview to have that sort of thing. So what does that mean? You can have a connector when you leave the office. It changes you don't do anything. All you do is leave. You enable the location services to authenticate to share data with your Microsoft Flow, and maybe when you leave the office, it changes your status. Maybe when you get to the office, it changes your status. Maybe you're just tracking that and putting it into an Excel spreadsheet. So if you're a delivery resource that bills for your time outside the office, you can track yourself all week. It's just a pretty cool thing that I think I could do a lot. I could have a lot of fun with. I could be tracking my kids when they left the house without them knowing. There's some, and maybe that's the reason that that Microsoft has been slow to release this connector that uses that leverages location services. in this way. But that geofencing has been released in preview as of earlier this month. I guess the last part, as we are starting to run out of time here, in terms of what's ahead for Flow, this is the next 12 months of what Microsoft is working at and general availability. So the contextual flows in Microsoft Teams. If you haven't looked into Microsoft Teams, you should. That is where Microsoft is sending us all. So they're adding some improvements there. The things that I'm most interested in this list, the integrated alert creation in Power BI. So Power BI is expanding its integration with Microsoft Flow to make it easier to go from insight to action. If you remember the graphic that showed the Power Apps, Microsoft Power BI is designed to give you insight into your data. Flow is designed to drive you to action. So embedding Microsoft Flow with Power BI can set triggers that, if you see this in a Power BI KPI that you're tracking, if something goes, into the red, having Microsoft Flow give you an alert is a pretty powerful tool. The other thing that I think is really cool is the support for guest users in flows and approvals. So right now you always had to, as we mentioned, you have to be inside the same organization. Now you can share flows currently with people outside your organization, but being able to actually support guest users. Approvals could only be sent to other people in the same company. Sometimes you've got, you need approvals from, maybe it's from vendors or from customers. You can define that now. So in the next 12 months, Flow is going to support guest users in your Flow. So the input doesn't have to be just from someone within your own organization. So I think that that is cool, and that's enabled. It's supported, I guess, through Azure Active Directory, guest users, but you don't really even need to, all that stuff starts to sound complicated. You don't need to worry about any of that. The interface is the same, whether it's a guest user or not. You just define it based on email. So as always, the best place to find information on Microsoft Flow is at flow.microsoft.com, and as well as the Flow blogs that really have the up-to-date day-by-day progress of new features, etc. So I think, other than, I think next I've got questions, and I don't see any questions in the GoToMeeting interface. So I will just double check with Angie. Angie, did you have any questions during the presentation?
No, Jeff, none have come through.
Okay, I'm actually going to pop out of my presentation and just go to, just for the last couple minutes here, just to show you, here I am in the Flow portal or website, and I can go to look at the flows that I have created, any of the connectors I have enabled. I've got both flows that I've created just for me, as well as flows that I've shared with my team. This one you can see I've got turned off right now. This is one that's syncing with our nav environment that sends a notification email once a credit limit has been modified. I'm sharing that with Tom as a fellow owner, but I've got these connections enabled. Everything is green, so I could turn this on right now without worry. If I go back to my flows, I've got a flow button I created that was email me my location, which is again pretty basic. It's running whenever I press that virtual button on my phone. Got another one that I like to do as a prank for some people, but I've got to get tweets about a chosen hashtag and then send an HTML email. The fact that you can send an HTML formatted email is new. It used to be just plain text, which was pretty boring. But if I get into that, just to look at my inbox here, I turned on one right before and I think I was searching on. I had to look at Twitter to see what was trending, but Cohen testimony was trending, and so I turned it on, and in the course of about 6 minutes, I got somewhere in the neighborhood of like 1,200 tweets that with that hashtag. So I have to clean up my email after this presentation. But you start to get an idea of just of how easy it is to fool around with this. I would suggest we've done some presentations where I go through some more in-depth how I set those Flic, those button automated order emails. We've got some of those recorded, so I would encourage you to get to our website to check on that. And let me get back to the slideshow and just say that you can get to any of our upcoming events at innovia.com/events, and as well as looking at any of the pre-recorded stuff. So you can get to that at our website. And I think Angie, do you have anything to say about future events, or if I direct them there, that is good enough for you?
Yes, I do have some information. But first of all, if anyone has any further questions that you would like to contact us on, please feel free to contact us and we'll get those addressed. Thank you, Jeff, for the presentation. It was very well informative. I hope everybody got a little bit of takeaway from it today. And for everyone that is watching on demand, thank you for joining us as well. And we do have a few more webinars coming soon. Next Tuesday, March 5th, we have Stacy Dose from Avalara presenting on the secrets to mastering the ever-changing sales tax landscape. And we have Mark Hamblin from InsightWorks presenting on Business Central apps for distribution and manufacturing. That webinar will be on Wednesday, March 6th. And Focus is coming up in March in Houston, Texas. Focus is a 2-day deep dive training event to help you get a deeper understanding of your Microsoft Dynamics NAV, Power BI, and Business Central systems. To learn more about Focus and to get all the details for this conference, you can visit our conference page on our website, and that's innovia.com/conferences. If you are interested, please register. And we do have our annual customer conference coming up in April in the Wisconsin Dells. Contact your rep or visit our conference page where it will have all of the details for our conference. This is a free event to attend. We would love to have you. Register now. Hotel rooms are going fast. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another Innovia webinar. Have a great day, everyone.